Yeah, I mean, we suck at it. We don't have to suck at this, right? Like you're making me remember, like, before I got into cyber, I was in business continuity and they were great at sharing everything, like really, really good at getting together and sharing what was going on with their peers. And we don't do that. And I think part of that is risk, and it's like the newness of this risk, right? So I'm thinking there's a great guy called Robert Chaffee who was a victim of the Kaseya breach, runs an MSP, great MSP, and he's sharing his story a lot, what happened and how that felt. And the breach coaches around him, those attorneys, they're nervous as hell, right? Because they're going, don't say anything, don't admit anything, you don't want to admit liability, I think maybe we don't want to look stupid, right? You don't want to say it was admin, it's the intern's fault. Like, you don't want to say that. So we don't share. And, I think we need to stop jumping on people when they do get breached. Like, how quick is everyone to go, oh, well, if they'd invested more, they'd be fine. Like, we don't know. Like, maybe finding a way, and this is a bigger problem, but, how do we reduce that risk of litigation? And, I guess sometimes we don't want to, but how you reduce that so we can share in a safe way. I think when we get those things, because I feel like there's a willingness to share. Like, everyone I talk to says what you've just said, we suck at sharing, how can we get better? But we aren't getting better. And I do think it's around that risk, and having those channels as well to do it.
Karla Reffold. Thank you for being here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm very excited to talk to you.
Hey, I appreciate it because you have a unique background into cybersecurity. Like currently, I know you're COO. Most people think CISO or anything like that, and you've had a path through recruitment. Can you walk me through just kind of briefly, how did you end up to where you are? Because I'm sure someone's watching this, they're going to Google your name just like I did and just be like, oh my goodness. And some people would think, how do I get there? Like, how does this even happen? So could you just tell us, how does this happen?
How does this happen? So I set up my own recruitment business a few years ago now. And about a few months into that, we were doing general risk management roles. Someone said, you know what, you want to get on with this cyber thing. Cyber's going to be big. So a couple of months after doing cyber, we were like, okay, we're just doing cyber. And like, yeah, always very grateful to that person for that piece of advice. So I had a cyber recruitment business for best part of 10 years. And that meant I was in and around the industry a lot as it was really growing. And when the time came for me to move out of that role, it was a really natural transition for me to go into a cyber vendor or a cyber company. So I've had since then a few people go, how does a recruiter become a COO? And I'm like, you know what, I was leading a business, I grew a business, I sold a business, like I know how to run a business. And the fact is I'm doing it in a sector where I'm definitely learning more about cyber, but I know a little bit, and I know a lot of people that have the answers when I don't.
You're very humble. You're very humble because if you look, you've won like every award. like,
Well, there's
like
a few to go. There's a few I've got my eye on.
nice. Yeah, I like every award, like top 50 women in security, finalists for Women of the Future Award, Entrepreneur of the Year, Future Ladies Award for Mentor, all kinds of stuff. Like like every award. So you're doing fantastic. So as you had a business, so you learned the business side of business, which I feel is something that has been lacking in security greatly, because you get a few keyboard nerds like myself, and all we focus on is the zeros and ones and the threat intelligence and all, like everything that encompasses this, that we forget that we are risk advisors. We're not really decision makers. So how do you balance that understanding the business, but leading a team and possibly communicating with those that do not understand the business?
Yeah, that's a really great question because it comes up a lot, right? Especially if you want to get to those more senior roles, you do need to understand how the business works. And I used to say to people like, just read the Financial Times or something like that on a weekend, or whatever it is online. Don't read something that isn't about security and is about business, just to start getting like that awareness. And I think I understand things in really simple ways. So I find it quite easy to communicate something in very simple words, I think. So yeah, and I do see that, sometimes the team are there thinking about, well, how do I make this work? And it's like, well, this is why the business needs it. Like, let's explain the why. And I think that often helps somebody else go, okay, well, now I know why I'm achieving something. Now I just need to work out how I do it.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I attempt to do the same. So I went backwards through my career versus kind of what you did, learning the business, then learning cyber. I learned the cyber side and then grew into the business. So when I'm talking to young individuals or students, I always tell them, if you have your bachelor's degree and you're looking to go for your master's degree, get an MBA or get something regarding management if that's the role you want to grow into, because those are the areas you're going to have to learn to communicate with. Like if you're a senior security engineer and you're trying to talk to a COO or talk to a CIO or CEO that doesn't understand the security side, it's going to be extremely difficult unless you can tie that into business. Because I view security is a lot like insurance. You hate paying for insurance until something happens. And unless your organization is just absolutely atrocious on the security side, you don't really have data breach Wednesdays or data breach Tuesdays. Like those things don't happen. You may go a year, may go 2 years or 3 years without a breach or a critical security incident, but you still have to move forward. It's like, we had this firewall for 5 years, nothing's happened, but we need to replace it. And it's going to cost $20,000, $50,000 if it's an enterprise level firewall IDS system. And they just may not understand it at all. Like, why will I spend this money if nothing is happening?
Yeah. And like, it's a fair question, right? I think like we are seeing ever increasing budgets in security and they can't go on forever, so that is a fair question for boards and leadership teams to ask, because it's really about risk tolerance. Like, how much risk are you willing to accept? And I think what's really great over the past few years is boards understand that risk a lot more. Cyber is now top 5 risk pretty consistently. So they understand it. It's whether or not, are they getting their advice from you, or who are they getting it from? Where is that advice coming from? And that's the level. You either need to understand who those influencers are, or you need to find out how you can be that influencer so that you can get the protection and the budget that you believe is needed.
Excellent point. Because my opinion is that security like doesn't exist. Like, if you say, hey, this is going to be secure, unless it's on pen and paper, because they ain't hacking yet. they ain't hacking like pen and paper yet. They may. This is going to age poorly, I know it, but they're not hacking pen and paper yet. However, if it's online, if it needs to be accessible to any degree, it's not really secure. Is there certain levels of insecurity that we need to accept? So you're accepting a certain level of insecurity. And you wrote and you spoke about, to quote you, you said you can never be 100% secure. So why do you invest? Kind of towards that question. Can you provide a little bit more context to that and let us know kind of why do you invest, or do you not invest, or where's that cap that you put? Because cyber nerd here should be an unlimited budget. However, speaking with a bias here, but you coming from the business side, kind of why do you invest, or how much should you invest? I know there's no specific number to it. Every business is different, but how do you view that?
I don't think it's realistic to have like that unlimited budget, right? So you do have to work out as a leadership team what level of loss is acceptable. If you think about retailers and theft, they write off 1 or 2% of their products every year. They just know that will go missing or be stolen. They accept that level of risk, and I think that's harder to do when it comes to data. But I think you have to work out, well, where is my level? How secure do I want to be? A bit like we do with backups and disaster recovery, right? You would say, well, how quickly can I recover these services based on that spend? And we have to do something kind of similar. And now what I'm really seeing is that move to recovery. And I do wonder, like, feels a little bit like we've all just given up, right? But, you know, understanding that if we're saying it's not if, it's when, then we need to know that we can back up and we can recover, and how quickly we can recover from those incidents. And that's where I'm seeing more investment going. And then honestly, you kind of need to be able to outrun your competition, right? You need to be a less attractive target. That's maybe not true for all industries, but on the whole, if you're the less attractive target, you're not as easy to hack, then that's maybe where your limits need to go. And there's, you know, I don't think you can put a dollar amount on that, right? It depends on what your revenues are, but that's how I think about budgets and spend.
Nice, interesting, because I know a lot of security professionals and even business professionals, they want to become proactive versus being so reactive to security. And I know from the business side of things, we spend a lot of our times, you know, disaster recovery. We spend a lot of our times in business continuity and things that might be viewed as reactive. How do you think we should become more proactive, or if you think we should become more proactive in our security approach, rather than, all right, after this happens, this is what we're going to do, and more of, this is how we're going to keep anything from happening, kind of the proverbial cyber seatbelt. We're doing that, Karla. You and I, that's ours. The cyber seatbelt. Do you think that's a plausible reach, and how much should a business think about that in investing in towards proactive security measures versus reactive security measures?
So I guess I think two things. The first thing is, what are threat actors doing, right? If you don't have a really good source of threat intelligence, so you can see what's happening and get ahead of that, then I don't know how you're doing anything. Like, you know, if you're just trying to secure everything against everything, I really don't know how you're doing that. So like, what actually is the threat to you and your organization right now, and what is likely to be coming to you? I think that's the first thing. The second thing, when it comes to being proactive, that I see a few companies doing this, a couple of really interesting people out there. Can you take what you're doing and make that revenue generating? So a company called Jupiter One, basically that's how that company was born. There's a couple of other people where they've managed to do that too. So you do that, you change the dynamic, you change what budget you can demand, and potentially you've done something really interesting that supports the rest of the industry. How can you share what you're doing as well? So I guess I think two things on that, but yeah, probably that getting ahead and really understanding what matters to you, what's your big threat. That's the thing I think you've got to do, because then you can put your resources in the right place.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you brought up something interesting that I think our community, the cyber community, we do poorly, and I think that's putting it very lightly, is sharing the information, like what are you doing? Information sharing in cyber is not where it needs to be. I know there's a balance of staying ahead of your competition in regarding to business, like being more innovative or coming out with different solutions than your direct competitors. But also, I think it's important for us to share. You don't have to share your proverbial postmortems or anything out there, but many organizations get hacked, and me and a bunch of other people think, how did this happen? Not because I want to trash your company, but I need to make sure it's not going to happen to us. Because was the username admin and the password admin, or did something else happen? Because I want to understand what happened so it doesn't happen to us. And I don't think we do a good job at all about that. A lot of it is that from the cyber side and or the business side is we got breached, and I don't want to say how, because I don't want to lose our customers. I don't want to lose our market share, and that's going to directly impact us, but it's also negatively impacting the community because we're all sitting flat-footed, and the threat attacker can use this play for business A, same play for business B, same play for business C, same play for business D, because none of them are talking about it, and they all share the same flaws, the same vulnerabilities. What are your thoughts on information sharing being a cyber business professional or a business cyber professional, on how much should an organization be willing to share? And do you feel that side, that reaction I have is overreacting, or do you feel there's a compromise that could be had with that?
Yeah, I mean, we suck at it. We don't have to suck at this, right? Like you're making me remember, like, before I got into cyber, I was in business continuity, and they were great at sharing everything, like really, really good at getting together and sharing what was going on with their peers. And we don't do that. And I think part of that is risk, and it's like the newness of this risk, right? So I'm thinking there's a great guy called Robert Chaffee who was a victim of the Kaseya breach, runs an MSP, great MSP, and he's sharing his story a lot, what happened and how that felt. And the breach coaches around him, those attorneys, they're nervous as hell, right? Because they're going, don't say anything, don't admit anything, you don't want to admit liability, I think maybe we don't want to look stupid, right? You don't want to say it was admin, it's the intern's fault. Like, you don't want to say that. So we don't share. And, I think we need to stop jumping on people when they do get breached. Like, how quick is everyone to go, oh, well, if they'd invested more, they'd be fine. Like, we don't know. Like, maybe finding a way, and this is a bigger problem, but, how do we reduce that risk of litigation? And, I guess sometimes we don't want to, but how you reduce that so that we can share in a safe way. I think when we get those things, because I feel like there's a willingness to share. Like, everyone I talk to says what you've just said, we suck at sharing, how can we get better? But we aren't getting better. And I do think it's around that risk, and having those channels as well to do it.
Yeah. So a thought I have for you, it came to me as we're talking about this. I think that the risk is possibly, and this is probably pretty vain, you be in this industry long enough, you begin to get vain. So many breaches have happened. Back 20, 15 years ago, You get breached, you're concerned about your market share, and that is real because customers were showing with their dollars that I'm not going to shop at company A because all this data was just leaked out. Now there's breaches 24/7. And the vain part is I'm thinking society is less prone to stop shopping there because there's a breach, because everyone's breach numb. If that's another thing we could say, like the people are breach numb. And so you have a breach at company A, no one hears about it. Like unless it's absolute massive, SolarWinds, Okta type thing, no one hears about it. And so no one's going to change their behavior. And so I feel that holding on to that information in fear of losing total market share, unless it's something horrific that has happened, not that people aren't going to hear about it anyway, it's just society's not reacting in the way that is the causation of I'm not telling anyone because customers are going to stop shopping here. I think that's died down significantly. What have you seen anything that contradicts that or not?
No, I think that's exactly it. I've been saying for a few years, like maybe because I'm in the industry, but I've just breach fatigue, I was calling it. Like, I don't care. I'm not going to stop shopping at Target, lose my data. What, like you just, and there's so little you can do about it, right? Like I got a message a couple of years ago, my son's data had been leaked by his a sports company. And I really dislike that. He's a child, like that's his data for life. And that really bothered me. I was like, well, what do I do? This is the one option he has to play this sport. So we can't not go. I literally have no recourse on this. So, yeah, it was just, you are fatigued to it. You are numb to it. And so we don't care. We don't change our behavior. Like,
yeah.
You see that in all sorts of areas. We don't change our behavior based on climate change and sustainability goals of companies, things we say we care about. We just don't. What you care about now is, can I get my gas when I go to the gas station? Like, does Starbucks have my favorite type of coffee, or is there a problem that's actually affected me in a day-to-day way rather than a data way? That's the area. And that's why I think we're seeing this move to how do we recover?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that it's come to that, but I think that's a reality. So we spent some time, we spoke about risk, and kind of what is risk, what organizations struggle with, what the community we're struggling with is, how do you quantify cyber risk? How do you, like, we say there's a risk and the risk is out there, like, yes. But there has to be a way to measure what level of this risk. Is it something critical? Is it something that is going to happen? Or is it the proverbial zombie apocalypse where, like, it may happen, but I'm not preparing for it? So how do you feel about quantifying risk? How do you go about doing that?
So I love this question. I'm going to try not to plug Orpheus too hard on this answer. But so we look at that with, how NIST looks at it, right? Vulnerability, threat, and impact all together. Companies are the ones really that need to decide the impact. How critical is a supplier or a service line to you? Most people focus on vulnerability and, what does attack surface look like, or what issues do we have? And not enough people add that threat component in. So that I think is really important. There are some great companies doing really interesting things with quantification. People like Cybercube, I think, are really interesting for how you quantify that risk. And then, people like us who are doing scores on vulnerabilities and scores on companies and using that threat data to inform those scores. So you can kind of get a nice little number that makes things easy to understand. So I think there's a few things out there as we start to quantify it. And as we start to, going back to the very beginning, how do you communicate that to a business person and make them say, okay, this threat is much more important than this one. So I think sort of there are a few companies like us doing that are trying to help with that.
Yeah, is it more, excuse me, is it more than just the probability versus the consequence, like the probability and the impact? is the quantification much deeper than that? Because I know the basics is, is a probability of a 3 on whatever scale, like a Likert or Likert scale that you have, and the consequence is a 3. And so you put it together, you get a 6, or if you're multiplying, you get a 9. Is your quantification methods much deeper than that, or is it?
Yeah, as are, yeah, they're we're pulling in dozens of different sets of data and different points and kind of looking at real time. So it is a little bit deeper than that for what we're doing. Yeah, I mean, I think the way you've just described it is a pretty traditional way of doing those risk assessments, and is kind of absolutely essential. But I think what we see in cyber is those unlikely risks, they're becoming more and more likely, right? Like, how likely would you have said it was a year ago that a cyber attack, well, it has been a year, 2 years ago, that, a cyber attack means you can't fill up your car at the gas station? Like, I don't think people were saying, like, that's the apocalypse type of scenario. So in cyber, that's why it's really hard. It's why we're seeing insurance premiums go through the roof, right? Because the insurers haven't worked out quite yet how to really underwrite those for those sort of losses and predict what's coming down the line and predict that threat actor behavior.
Interesting. So it's okay. You don't have to like plug the company, but it's a good, if you're struggling with that problem, there's a solution there. There's certainly a solution there. All right. So one area you're a total subject matter expert on is recruiting and being in recruitment. I know you started by saying you started your company and you're a recruiting firm specifically in cybersecurity. I know there might be a couple people watching this thinking, I would love to get into cybersecurity. What advice would you have, like, from that recruiting, from being like one of the top recruiters, to help pioneer recruitment in this industry? What advice would you have for someone new looking to get in?
Network. Just build your network. Everything else is secondary. It just really, really doesn't matter if you have a good network. And I've seen it time and time again, because a lot of jobs don't get advertised. And if it's an entry-level role in cybersecurity right now, you're getting 200, 300, 400 applicants for one role sometimes. Like, that is crazy, and it's crazy hard to stand out. I've recruited a couple of those at Orpheus in the last few months, and the application, we look at every application, and we I think go back to every single person. But if someone messages me and says, hey, make sure you take a look at this person because I've been mentoring them or I know them or whatever, I make sure I go and look at that application, and I make sure that person gets like at least a response. So it makes the hugest difference.
Yeah, I agree. Some of the best positions that I've received I've had some inside help. And I'm a product of my environment, and a lot of great people helping me out, getting me to where I am, because this industry's unique. There's a few highlights from it and there's a few lowlights from it. And a lot of people suffer from imposter syndrome. And that's something I want to ask you about, because to plug you, Karla writes a lot for Forbes, a lot for Forbes. And one of the articles you wrote that I absolutely love, it's titled, I'm reading it right now. So 3 things to do when imposter syndrome strikes. And I feel that's something that hit home with me, because I suffer a lot from it. Even currently now, it's like, even before starting a podcast, like, why would anyone listen to me? Kind of what do I have to say? What do I have to bring? Because this industry does bring a lot of imposter syndrome. You think everyone thinks in zeros and ones. You think people write in C on paper and compile it somehow. Like, you just imagine this industry being a lot more tougher than it is. And being an educator, being taught in a few colleges, I tell all my students, the classroom's a lot harder than the industry. Here, your username's not admin, your password's not going to be admin. Out there, the password is admin somehow. So what advice do you continue to give people that are dealing with imposter syndrome, whether in cybersecurity or outside of cybersecurity?
I think for me, the number one thing is like, is your thought true, right? Like, what do you take that one you've just said, like, what do I have to bring? Well, what do you have to bring? Like, you've got something inside you saying, I want to do this. I've got something to say. Like, who else is out there doing that? Do they have more to say than you? And, the idea that no one will listen to it. Like, is that true? That's not true. You don't know that's true. This could be the most successful cybersecurity podcast that exists in the next couple of months, right? You don't know that because you haven't tried. So I think, like, when you start to question, is this true? That then, like, for me, starts to give me a different perspective and different thoughts. I'm, I guess, really lucky. I get really angry when I see people talking about stuff that I know about, and I feel like they're wrong. I'm like, I know more than that person. I should be talking about that. So, like, I let that kind of anger drive me, maybe. But yeah, like, we all have these thoughts. That's the other thing to remember. We all think like this, right? I don't think I've ever met a CISO that says, I know everything about security. Most of them will admit they know very little, maybe about one part of security, and they build a team and ask people for all the other areas. So I think when you start looking at who else is out there, like, what do they know? Like, how do I compare to those people? And, maybe comparison is not always the way to go, but, like, go check your assumptions, check the stories you're telling yourself.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's true. Cause me, I hit a point where it's like, screw it, just do it. Like, let's just roll with it. But cybersecurity and imposter syndrome is a real thing, and along with burnout and feeling that you have to take on, like, the entire world. You have to understand everything about cyber, when honestly you don't. That level of intelligence that we spoke about, like threat intelligence. Like, are you trying to block everything? You're trying to secure the world where you throw on your tinfoil hat and you're like, hey, we got to block all threats? Or do you know what's most likely going to happen to you? Is it ransomware is huge? What kind of ransomware should you be worried about? How is the kind of ransomware being delivered? And become an expert there. You don't have to be an expert in everything, because I don't know if that person exists. I don't know if that person really exists out there. Another article you wrote that I loved was about stereotypes and breaking stereotypes. Being a business professional, cyber professional, recruiting professional, I think you probably have a unique view that a lot of us don't have. Me, being a Black American, I have the view of just my lived experience and the lived experience of those around me. You, as a recruiter, you have a view of the entire organization. Like, I can see how a lot of people got here, and I can see how a lot of these stereotypes are being brought out, or how a lot of these stereotypes are being interpreted. Can you give us your thoughts on not just the article you wrote on breaking stereotypes, but your thoughts, period, on breaking stereotypes?
Yeah, I think it's a hard place to navigate right now. Like 2 years ago, I felt really positive that we might start to see some real change. For how we treat Black people, how we treat, like, all ethnicities, how we treat women in not just security, but in everything. And I see more people wanting to change, wanting to learn more, and wanting to make change in how they recruit their teams. 10 years ago, there were definitely companies I had where you would see, certain names got interviews and certain names didn't. Like, that was, and no one would ever say that, right? No one would ever admit to that. I think now people understand we do all have some, you can't say you don't have unconscious bias, like that, just that exists. So, and now there's just more awareness, more willing to talk about it, more willingness to say, I need some help to make my team more diverse, make my team better, make my team stronger, and I want to do that. And actually, I'm willing to learn what I don't know so that I can achieve that. So I still feel quite positive that we're moving in the right direction. I guess I'm disappointed we're not moving there quicker, but I guess I see some positive changes.
I agree. I think there's a lot of positive changes. There's some stride. We're taking strides forward for sure. But yeah, you're right. Unconscious bias is real. You have to understand your bias and how are you interpreting those. How are you interpreting those names? And I love the fact you brought up names, because that's huge. I'm training up one person that works with me, and he's younger, newer to management, newer to being leading a team, new to that. And so when we're going through the hiring process, one of the lessons I gave to him was the first thing people read is a name. And so if you see the last name Martinez, see the last name Garcia, you see the name Jessica, you see the name Sarah, like how you're interpreting like a female name, or you're going to internalize that somehow. Like, how does that make you feel? Does that make you feel good? Does it make you feel I don't want to interview this person? Do you read the resume differently? Because you need to check your own bias. You need to check yourself and check your prejudice as you're going through resumes and looking at them. And one of the hard admissions that I would have to say is, thank God my grandma named me Eric, and not like a Darius or Jaquarius or something like that. Because I get past some of that, then it's like, oh, not like a deep O, but it's like the name didn't fit what I envisioned, so I at least can get into the room. I love the fact that you brought up names, because I think that's huge.
I think, acknowledge it, right? It doesn't make you a bad person that you have those thoughts, right? That is society. Like, if you didn't have unconscious bias, you'd be dead. Like that's how it works. It protects you. So like, it's okay. Or you have to kind of accept that, all right, I had that thought. That thought doesn't have to be how I now act. Like I can act in a different way and realize it, and then take a different course of action to what I might do if I just went, well, of course I don't discriminate against people. Like, I think being able to say, like, it's okay that you thought that, for me at least, like that, giving myself that permission has really helped. Like there's a Harvard test you can do to go and uncover your unconscious bias. And I haven't taken it for a long time, I'm too scared. But the first time I took it, given, I was like, I'll take the gender one. Of course, I'm a big fan of women in cyber, women's rights in general. And I was a little bit biased against women. Like that really shocked me. But when you look at how I was brought up and the things that go around you, like, okay, well, I can forgive myself for that. I can make sure it doesn't impact how I behave. And I hope right now that if I took it again, it would be different. But you just have to acknowledge it.
Yeah, that's true, and that's interesting. So that Harvard test, I'm gonna look that up, because I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take it.
I tell you what, you take it, I'll take it again.
Yes, let's do it. I am down with that. So I know there might be a CISO or COO or CEO watching this, or a hiring manager watching this, thinking, okay, we know unconscious bias, some good points there, but they want to learn how could they better recruit women and minorities in cyber, or in general, into their organizations. A lot of companies, they say, hey, we support diversity, we support equity and inclusion, because I would say they firmly believe it. they entirely believe it. But you look at the organization and it says that you don't look like the world that you're preaching out to. What tips do you have on recruiting minorities, recruiting women into roles, into organizations?
I could talk forever on this. So I think like first thing is check your leadership team, right? If you're saying you want a diverse team and you have a team of 10 white men that is your board, that needs to change, because you can't possibly understand the experiences of the people that you say you want to bring into your business. You have to change that first. Then I think you have to go beyond those superficial things, right? It's not just about advertising on a mum's job board, or advertising where you think the type of people you want to recruit. It's not about just having a support group internally. Those things are great, but they're not enough. Actually, you have to change the system of how your company operates. If you are requiring a degree, you are building discrimination into your process. White men earn degrees at 11 times the rate of Black women. You are automatically discriminating against people, and you don't even realize it. And I think what we've seen, great piece of research came out recently saying companies found it easier to hire women since the pandemic because the way we work has changed. Now, that's not about, hey, we're going to give you childcare, we're going to give you flexibility. It's about saying we're going to do business in a different way that means all people with all types of caring responsibilities or backgrounds are now welcome and able to succeed in our companies. And that's huge, right? That's not easy, but there's a lot of research that backs that up. Again, Harvard Business Review did a big piece of research about how law firms could improve how many women came through and got promoted to partner. And it wasn't about those superficial women's groups and childcare and flexible working. You just can't travel and make 12-hour days the way you get to partner. You have to change that. So we have to make some big changes if we truly want to achieve what we say we believe.
I love it. I love it. I love it because I believe firmly that you don't have to hire specifically for race or gender. You don't have to. One of the questions I would ask is, how many have you interviewed? Have you interviewed a woman? Have you interviewed a minority? If you haven't, how were you comfortable making that decision? Making a promotion. I've seen countless promotions just like, well, who'd you interview? We interviewed one person. Like, oh, all right. Like, so you may take some time to be intentional about it. Looking for support if needed. There's a lot of minority groups. There's an entire women in cybersecurity organization that you can be in contact with. Utilize some of those resources before making a decision. Do you have to do it every time? No, but should you be intentional about it? Like, definitely, because there's a few prejudices and biases that exist out there with women and minorities that some research says, and I have to preface with that, a lot of women and minorities, they will not apply for a job unless they feel like they check every box. What are those boxes that they're looking to check? Like, are you being fair? Like, whether a degree, or is it an entry-level job that requires 5 years of experience in the CISSP, something like that? Then you're building bias, yes. And if some of this is news to a hiring manager, hopefully not at a director or executive level. If so, please read it. Please read it. Don't go through this blind, because you're not going to do yourself any favors.
No, you're not. And the thing I hate the most at the moment is when we talk about cognitive diversity. Well, it's not really about what our teams look like. It's about having diversity of thought. Like, maybe eventually, right? Maybe that is the goal, because that is what we want. But I think if you take out people's experiences, like how your lived experiences out of that. You can't get cognitive diversity, and you can't say, well, we all look the same, we all went to the same school, but we really do think differently. You know, like he likes mayonnaise and I don't. That's not cognitive diversity. Like, and I just feel like this is the excuse that we whip out when we haven't put the effort into making change to get like true diversity into our teams. And when we have that, when our workforces look like our population, maybe then we talk about it. But oh my God, stop talking about it now.
Oh gosh, I love it. I love it. That hit my heart for sure. Because I've heard that a ton. An absolute, just more than I'd like to admit. You know, the whole cognitive diversity on it. So, but thank you so much, Karla, for your time and your expertise. I wholeheartedly appreciate you and the work that you're doing for cybersecurity. Very impactful, very impactful. And anyone else listening, thank you so much for making it this far. Thank you so much for listening to the entire thing. And as always, down below, you know, it's the YouTube comment section. By all means, I'll leave it open, because don't take anything that we're talking about, whether it's information versus data versus intelligence, or is it about diversity? Don't take any of this and just hold it in. Talk about it. Bring it to your organizations. Bring it to the comment section, because I feel iron sharpens iron. You know, the more we talk about it, the better we will get. Let's not be some of those information hoarders that we're talking about. We get new information, we don't share it out. Hopefully you all got a little bit better through this. And as always, this is Dr. Huffman from the Mike Club. Much love to you all. Peace.
Thank you.